want the government to come and plant this saboteurs and destroy the movement. What, is anyone thinking about that history? Excellent, that's it.
Is that enough, or you want one more? Is there one more question? Oh, we got all of them. Let's just take one more, because one of them we should still use it. Yeah.
I was present at the march that happened a few weeks ago.
Just be quiet.
Yeah, I was speaking, I wanted to know if you could talk a little bit about the march that happened a few weeks ago, the large march on the mall for Black Lives Matter, and just like, what was it like to organize that, and what are...
Yeah, you'd have to be more specific.
The name of the restaurant. Okay, I don't have it specific.
Okay. It was probably fun if I organized it. It was probably great to go if I went and didn't organize it.
Organizing actions.
Yeah.
Is that, so can you all just answer whichever of those you want, and I'll write up your names up here?
I actually sorry. My first answer is, okay, so this thing that I'm pushing, I'm going to do a really silly thing. Do you all remember that song when we were little? It's like, okay, so yeah, I want you to tweet a lot. The other thing is, like, social media is really incredible, and that second point about doing reading and researching and doing your research, the one breadcrumb that I have done, because I think social media is really fabulous, is while you were asking, I posted a comment on the Facebook page for White Solidarity for Black Liberation. So our names are there, as well as a link to a couple of resources. And I think from that, you can then harness the power of the internet to do the rest of the things that you need to do. I'll defer to Becca in terms of answering the questions.
While we can think of answering this question here, Bud's question, in terms of what, there's a lot being done, I would offer a resource. It's a very important, it comes out of the Malcolm X Grassroots Movement report that they did on Trayvon Martin. It's a book, it's on the PDF online, it's called Let Your Model Be Resistance. Very important. It goes into cop arts, it goes into how to organize educational things, it goes into how to, all kind of things regarding, it's so much, a lot. Let Your Model Be Resistance is the name of it. It's on the Malcolm X Grassroots Movement website. It's a PDF. It's pretty thick and goes into a lot of different modules and things, information. The other thing is that a lot of people are doing study groups. A lot of, just people are doing study groups and asking people to come. And so you do a study group, whether you're reading a book or doing a film. I find that study groups are more helpful than just reading on your own, because you get more out of anything that you're consuming, whatever information it is, when you can discuss it together with other people. Myself, with radio, alternative media, radio, the internet, writing articles. I mean, that's stuff that I do individually, and also organize with Black Organizing for Leadership and Dignity, and also the Wayside Center for Popular Education. We take people on retreats out in Virginia and go through a whole bunch of workshops and stuff like that. This gentleman's question, to me, the most exact answer I have for that, I think we can look at our movements and see also how paranoia can destroy you, if you've heard that. And so we get too centered on, and I'm not just talking to you, but anyone else who wants to know the answer to your question, there's a quote that Sekou Touré talks about. Sekou Touré was the first president of Guinea, and revolutionary Guinea. And he says the best way to deal with counter-revolution and within the ranks of revolution is to organize yourself so well and raise the work norms of your organization so much that even those who are trying to overthrow you have to actually work for the revolution just to keep their cover. So you can't even, if we end up, trying to, pinpoint and we don't have the smoking gun, then we can destroy our movement. But if we actually make it so tight that just because, just to be in there and keep your cover, you're actually having to contribute, I think that's the best thing.
I would just say, and I should have said this earlier, it's really important to my political awareness to have the understanding that, there's nothing Black people need to do for liberation, right? It's all about somehow angling to get white people to stop oppressing us. And that, racial progress is about white people recognizing our humanity and fully recognizing white people's humanity, and not Black people working harder to get out of the middle class. Which is why that, like, just to preamble the question of why I don't personally spend a lot of time doing like education for how do black people like deal with the police. I also think that like if you're black and the police stop you, you're kind of just screwed. Like don't punch them, but like everything else is based on what the cop wants to do. I will say other people disagree with me, which is probably a good idea. DC Ferguson does a lot of education. So DC Ferguson has street teams that go out and talk to kids. They've also partnered with the ACLU to do, I think, 4 Know Your Rights trainings to actually allow youth to know their rights. I do think it's important. It is not my focus. I do think you should know when your rights are being violated. More importantly, you should know how to address when your rights are violated. And DC Ferguson is doing both of those things. The Washington D. Center recently hosted Secure the Hood to talk about encrypting our emails to make sure they're not read. I personally assume I'm on a number of lists and they will decide what they want to do with me if we ever get to like armed struggle or like that level.
They kill it. We at armed struggle.
Yeah.
We just don't have to arm.
Yeah, and I mostly try and focus on, it takes a lot of trust to do this, right? Like, I just walk into spaces and say I'm gonna work, and we're gonna do the work, and I think, like, it is something that, right, paranoia ruins it as much, and I feel like, when I can say it, so stop talking.
So that's actually a really important thing. For the president down in Ferguson, I actually learned a really lot about organizing. Being a person who generally organizes face-to-face, I learned about the power of social media and digital tools, and also the learning curve of the law enforcement in relationship to social media and digital tools. And so we do think, Aaron said jokingly, but for real, in response to your question about whether we think about infiltration, he's like, yeah, every time our calls drops and we have our meetings on Google Hangout, we're like, oh crap, or your tweets don't load or something like that. So it's definitely something that you think about, but to Netflix's point, you just organize really hard. Like there are at least a half dozen people in this room who can tell you like how much work we put, and even I personally put into organizing really, really effectively so that people, I mean, it really is a job. It's an actual job that requires a crap ton of work and leadership and delegating and planning and really just hard things that people get paid lots of money to do. Not us, but somebody. Somebody gets paid to do it, right? And then in terms of work being done in Black communities, I think is one of the questions. A lot of emotional work. So one of the things that people hear me say a lot is that I walk into rooms in communities where I go to community meetings and I feel like the room is just dripping with trauma. Part of what Aaron was talking about, where it's like people have to tell their whole story before they can even get to the question, is that we don't create spaces, and this is part of the ways that we dehumanize people, and people specifically dehumanize people who identify or are identified as Black, is that we expect people to be functional in the face of incredible crisis and trauma. And so you asked me a question, like a couple of questions that I've actually been asked on Facebook. When I raised the name of Antonio Martin, who was armed at the Quick Trip in Berkeley, Missouri, which is not far from Ferguson, or a couple of other places. It's within a 5-mile radius of where 3 other Black male teenagers had been shot and killed by police while not being armed and not committing crimes. Within the last 4 months, Antonio Martin was armed in a state where it's legal to bear arms, and he was shot and killed. And people were like, you don't want to put him in the narrative because he was carrying a gun. And I'm like, well, think about it emotionally. Think about it as a person. If you were a person and other people like you had been being killed by the police in your area while they weren't doing anything and they were unarmed, would it make sense for you as a person who can legally take up arms legally because he was 18 and legally you can carry in Missouri to go and arm yourself and if confronted by a police officer, pull that weapon and try to protect your life before your life was taken? Would that make sense as a human being? Would it make sense? Right? And so when we read these articles emotionally, we're like, why would you do that? Why would you carry a gun? That's crazy. Why would you because you're a human being and you want to live. Right? And so the work that I do in Black communities is with solidarity, like the arts education piece and the like wonderful curriculum piece. It's really a cover for like let me into your nonprofit industrial complex so that I can do this emotional building work. I'm serious. I'm serious. It's let me provide space for people to be able to deal with some of this trauma and unpack it, and have some language for talking about it, and have a space where they can dig through it and think of, and take a space to feel it, and then maybe get to something where they feel like they can impact or be empowered to affect change. So that's the work that I focus on, and then also Lourdes and Erica, who are part of Black Lives Matter, who very specifically focused on people like emotional centering work, where they just go in communities and they do the work of like helping people work through the trauma, which is hard because it's not a thing that happens in isolated incidents, it's ongoing. It's every day you have mothers who are sending their children into the world, like Netfa said, and praying. Like here in DC, like, I hope my kid comes home today, right? And you have youth who are leaving their homes and who are not actually thinking about it because they can't. They have to compartmentalize like completely. They're like, if I do everything right, if I just get my grades right, if I wear the right things, if I walk the right way, if I talk the right way, then I will live, which is not true, but something that they have to tell themselves in order to be able to get out of the bed and out of the door. And so in terms of the work of Black communities, that's the work that I'm interested in doing, is people humanizing themselves, allowing themselves to be human, allowing themselves to react to trauma before having to be productive or having to have good responses that don't involve burning or looting or owning guns or cursing or being Black, as people say in the media, like that Black kid went off. Sorry, that was long.
I think that might be all we have for our time we have for our panelists. I think that's all we have time we have for our panelists. These are a huge round of applause. We will do our best to send out links to all of the various things that they mentioned in the follow-up email to this. So please be sure that you sign in at one of the two computers so we can send you the articles that Netfa mentioned, maybe the piece from Omalara, links to the organizations. Also in the last hour of this event, at around 4:30 or so, when we reconvene in this room, we're going to be talking about how to actually get involved with some of these organizations, how to help DC Ferguson with the Jump Bats campaign, administrative support for Black Lives Matter DMV, how to start a reading group and a study group, things like that. So I'm hoping this raised a lot of things for you, and we're going to be able to go and talk about it. What I want to do right now is we're going to invite the facilitators up in 5 minutes for the breakouts to announce which those are. And we're going to give you all 5 minutes just to turn to the person next to you, maybe the person that you came with, and just talk a little bit about what came up for you in this panel, what resonated with you, what challenged you, what questions were raised. Many of us have a lovely mentor, Nadine Block, who says the point of a good training is to leave with more questions than you came in with. So that's the goal for today. But so take 5 minutes and find a buddy and talk about this and just kind of debrief a little bit the amazing